Dr. Kim, what is the cold shoulder in marriage?
To me, it's like, I think it's like acting like the other person doesn't exist, or if they do, that they don't matter. I mean, that's kind of what I would see it. You're mad, so you don't talk, you don't communicate, you just don't interact with that person at all. And so it's really just saying like, you're not there.
Yeah.
And I don't care that you're not
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be the silent treatment, but also even if you're not totally shutting them down, like I think as adults, we don't usually give people the legitimate silent treatment where we don't speak a word to them. Like I remember in middle school specifically getting mad at girls and girls getting mad at me, and then they literally wouldn't talk to you. Like you'd ask them a question and they would just like turn their head.
Yes. I mean, that's the ultimate.
That's
But I
ultimate.
think that happens in marriage too.
Woo! Okay. Well, in most marriages, I don't think that happens, but I think what does happen is you'll only minimally speak to each other.
Yeah.
And so only when you absolutely have to speak to each other and it's like short answers, one word answers because you're visibly upset with them and you're avoiding them. You're not sitting in the same room with them. You're shutting down them.
They're living life
basically.
without them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Is the
right.
cold
And maybe
shoulder.
just the necessities. You need to pick up the kids.
Exactly.
Dinner night for the dishes.
Mhm.
I mean, just like that, which makes a statement anyway.
It does.
You
It
know,
does.
you're
And
not adding
even
any
the
honeys or
tone.
sweethearts or yeah.
Yeah, the tone of that, like your tone was perfect when you said that because we just like this attitude of just like I'm a robot to you now. Like we're not gonna be engaging with each other. I'm shutting
Right.
you down. You're getting the cold shoulder. This is
Yeah.
not happening. So why do you think people end up doing this? Why do they give the cold shoulder or the silent treatment in marriage? And do you think they're always conscious of it?
I think they're to make a point, to punish. Maybe they're hurt. They want you to hurt like they got hurt to get their way. I think they're conscious of it. I mean, I just don't know how you can be the real cold shoulder. I think sure you can be somebody that maybe is not, maybe you're an introvert or whatever, and so you don't interact as much. But if you're getting the cold shoulder, I can't imagine not knowing you're doing it.
Yeah. I think sometimes people know that they're upset and they know they're being not kind to their spouse and they kind of know they're shutting down, but they might not know to the extent that what they're doing it. Like, I
That's
don't
right.
know that people would say, oh, I'm giving my husband the cold shoulder. Oh, I'm giving my
Yeah.
husband the silent treatment. But rather they would say, I'm upset with my husband, and they're not really realizing the impact of what they're doing.
Right. And I think too, probably some people it affects more than others. Some people, when you've been given the older cold shoulder, handle it better than others. I don't think I would handle it very well because I like communication and interaction. So I think it would be, if Nancy did that. I mean, yeah, when she gets mad at me, I wouldn't consider it the cold shoulder. Does it take a while for us to get back on track sometimes? And she's not as warm as other times. But I always look at it, that's just part of the process that we just kind of went through. And I never see it as manipulative. I see it more as her working through it. So I guess maybe would say the cold shoulder would involve manipulation in some way because you're trying to
Absolutely.
get somebody to do what you want them to do, or they did something you didn't want them to do.
Yeah.
And so instead of sitting down and talking about them, telling how it bothered them, they're just ignoring that person.
Yeah, definitely. I think manipulation is a huge reason that people do this. I think also sometimes people might just feel really defeated, like nothing they're going to do is going to fix it anyways. And so they just kind of shut down because they feel really defeated and like they feel like they can't solve the conflict with you. And so it's not manipulation in that instance. It's not even anger or bitterness. It's just like, well, what are you going to do? I'm throwing my hands up there. I can't fix this. And so we're just going to live like this until hopefully one of us gets over it. And then I think sometimes people are really overwhelmed. And so they end up shutting down and doing this cold shoulder silent treatment thing. I think people are really stressed these days. And I think sometimes when people get really stressed, marriage conflict or marriage annoyances kind of just sends us over the edge and we shut down. And so I think in these instances, we really need to give each other grace if we feel overwhelmed or if we think our spouse is feeling overwhelmed, and try to understand what our spouse might be going through. I think especially if that's not our spouse's norm. So if your spouse
Yeah.
doesn't normally give you the cold shoulder and the silent treatment and then all of a sudden they're doing it, well, that should be a red flag. What's going on with them? If they don't normally do this, they might be really hurting and you need to come alongside them and help them. Something might be going on at work that you're not aware of. They might be struggling with depression inside their head or dealing with a spiritual battle or a mind battle. And instead of getting upset about it, come alongside them. And so I think that's one thing to be conscious of too.
Yeah, I think it goes to what we talked about a lot, being a student of your spouse.
Hmm.
If the behavior is different, why is it different? And I think the other thing is for me to know whether it's a cold shoulder or it's just Nancy working through something would be to look at their heart.
Mm.
If your heart is pure or your heart's in the right direction, and that it's not going to be the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
I think when that sin enters in and we're trying to make a statement like that, our heart is not pure, and you can see that. So I mean, it's really knowing your spouse enough to know what is going on here.
Yeah.
And if it's something in a pattern of the person really is given the cold shoulder and they won't listen to you, you know, then you got to try to get help some way. I mean, because that will kill a marriage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other reason that people sometimes do this is when they don't want to admit that they're wrong, or kind of they want to avoid apologizing. Have you ever seen that happen before, Dr. Kim?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's an avoidance type thing. And maybe sometimes, I know some people that does take them a little while to work through to get to the point where they can do that, where they can apologize. And that's just kind of where they process. Um, but yeah, I think that's true. Another way, it's just another way to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned earlier that sometimes Nancy does this, but it's not really the cold shoulder. It's just like kind of the recovery process of conflict. Do you ever do this to Nancy? And if so, why?
Oh, I'm perfect. So I
Okay.
don't.
I knew it.
No, I think she would say that I can pout. And I don't
Mm.
know that that's the cold shoulder exactly. It's still probably it's not healthy.
Yeah, it's not
Like that.
great.
No, it's not. It's not a great way to handle things. But I would say that's probably what she would say. And I don't stay upset very long. I recover
Mm.
really quickly. Uh, Sometimes it does take especially if I've done something that kind of hurt her in some way, it takes her a longer to recover like that. I recover pretty easy and I'm pretty forgiving, and so
Yeah, that's
you
interesting.
know,
Yeah, I think for me, when I do this, it's kind of like I'm blocking off affection and connection when I'm really angry. So I don't know if that's similar to what Nancy does, but it's like, I'm really angry. And so I don't want to connect with you. I don't want to bond with you. I don't want to speak to you or show any affection. And I think mostly my reasoning for doing this is probably hurt and bitterness. And so, again,
yes.
not great tactics, not a great way to fix your marriage problem. But if I'm just being honest, this is why I do that. And I do it sometimes. And then I think for Dylan, he doesn't really do the cold shoulder necessarily, but I think he disengages sometimes to
Mm.
avoid vulnerability. So if things are getting tense and it requires vulnerability, sometimes he just disengages and kind of shuts down. Do you think a lot of guys do that?
Yeah, no, I think that you'd really hit on something there. I think we do as guys when we don't feel comfortable with that we're gonna sometimes we get angry. I think it runs the gamut, but I think with all we're talking about, I think the more you can look behind the behavior of your spouse and try to see it from that perspective gives you a deeper understanding. Now, maybe that they're just being manipulative or they're just whatever, but it may be something, maybe they're just not comfortable with being vulnerable or talking about something. And so they're withdrawing because of that. And again, it's just taking time to figure your spouse out in a way that you can come alongside them. It's still the goal is to be a team in this. And how do we do that? Well, you can give the cold shoulder back, and that's going to be two people ignoring each other. That's not going to get you anywhere. And so, or is there a way to begin to address this and get some healing started?
Yeah, that is so good. You said so many great things in that, Dr. Kim. I love what you said, to look beyond the behavior. I think that's so
Yeah.
key in being a student of our spouse. So I think we've answered this, but maybe you have some more to say. Do you think this is effective or a healthy thing to do in marriages?
I just don't think that true cold shoulder, I just don't see that there's ever any benefit. The problem is sometimes people may do it and they get their way. And if you get in a pattern of that in marriage, then that's really unhealthy. And eventually the person that's always giving in or responding to what you want out of giving the cold shoulder, resentment's going to come in. They're not going to feel as connected. You may think it works for a while, but long term, it's not going to work. Long term, it's going to drive that person away and it's going to kill your marriage.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So what should we do instead? What should we do instead of the silent treatment or cold shoulder?
Talk,
Mhm.
communicate, share what's bothering you, seek to resolve, get help if you need it. All the things that we talk about, the healthy things. And we can, and maybe you saw that modeled in your parents. I'm sure that if someone that's really get the cold shoulder, maybe if they think about it, that's what they saw a parent do. And so it's learning to break those behaviors. And I think first just accepting this is really not healthy for our
Yeah.
marriage. Even if it's working a little bit, it's not healthy. And so Always the answer is it's putting the thing in front of you. What's the problem? And together, how do we solve this? Okay. There's a reason you're giving the cold shoulder. What is that? How do you express that to your spouse? How do you sit down and talk to your spouse about that? How do they talk to you about that? See if you can come to resolve it. If you can't, go get help.
Yeah, that's really good. I think one thing when it comes to this happening in your marriage is that if it's happening in your marriage on a regular basis, maybe your overall communication isn't good. So, not just
Probably.
when you have conflict. And so, a good practice would be to use our tool, the weekly marriage checkup guide. I think would be a great tool to use if this is something that
Absolutely.
you're seeing reoccurring in your marriage. I'll link that for free in our show notes, but it's just a time where you can sit down for 15 minutes each week and just walk through this checklist of good questions to ask each other so that you can communicate well and see if you have any problem areas in your marriage and talk about that and get on the same page. So I would recommend that. And then I just want to echo your get help if you need it thing that you said, because if you're struggling with this and this is happening on a regular basis, then you should go see a marriage counselor.
Hmm.
Maybe just talking about it and just communicating isn't going to do it enough, because what a marriage counselor can do that you just can't do on your own is see it from a third party perspective and help you to really hear each other. I don't know what it is. I'm sure you do because you're a counselor, about having a counselor speak to you, but they're just able to see things and ask questions in a different way and get you to hear each other. Dylan and I went to marriage counseling in 2019, and then again in the beginning of this year. And man, it has just been huge. And like, I felt like we were talking about these things, but then for some reason, getting in the counseling room, we were actually able to have productive conversations about these
Yes.
things. And it's just been so good. I mean, I think we'll go to marriage counseling at the beginning of every year forever because we've seen
Just can't
how
get back
good
on
it
track.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Hmm.
And I think it is. I think there's sometimes even when you just say what you may have said to each other at home and you say it in front of a third person, I think sometimes you even hear it different because you're aware that someone else is listening too, and maybe you listen to yourself a little different and realize, ooh, that wasn't real good or that wasn't real healthy.
Hmm.
And so I think that's yeah, obviously I'm very pro counseling.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. So, what steps can we take if our spouse is giving us the cold shoulder and silent treatment?
Uh, I think you've got to look at, okay, you're part of it to start with. I think it'd be easy to focus on, oh, this jerk, they're being, give me a silent treatment again. What's going on? What happened? What did you play a part in that, or what did that? And see, kind of look at it okay, what is going on here? Do I need to admit something I'm wrong? But to confront it, really say, I want us to be through. I want to work through this. If I've hurt you, or if I've offended you, I want to make that right. I don't even know what you're upset about. Can we
Hmm.
sit down and talk about this and get it on the table and try to break that cycle of doing it in an unhealthy way. And I think we all have unhealthy ways of communication, certainly when it comes to conflict. And I think, some couples, I would say early marriage, we probably communicated pretty good until it came to conflict. And then we had a lot to learn in that area because all of a sudden the dynamic changed and we were against each other in conflict always. It was never, here's the problem, how do we solve it? For years, it was like her way, my way, and we'd fight. And so I think it's learning that, okay, that's not healthy, seeing what's not healthy and agreeing to figuring it out.
Yeah, that's
How do we do
good.
this in a healthy way?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's just really important to communicate that you want to be on the same team with them. And
Yes.
so communicating kindly with them, that you want to be able to communicate with them and that you want to be able to solve problems together, for the good of your marriage, and just coming at it from that angle of like, hey, how do we make this work together? Because I don't feel like this is working, instead of using all those you statements, making it a
Yep.
we issue and a we problem so that you can come
It's a
alongside
good
it
way, but
together.
yes. Yeah.
So if we are the ones who tends to shut down in conflict when we are angry, what can we do to learn how to engage productively and stop doing this silent treatment thing?
You're going to have conflict. Every couple has conflict, and you can either do it in a healthy or unhealthy way. And I think just knowing that there is a way and that healthy conflict resolved grows a marriage. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of us have never seen that really happen. We think of conflict and it's all negative things, or maybe how we saw our parents fight or how we've been fighting our own marriage. And so, it's not a warm, fuzzy thing. And I think when we can realize that conflict's going to happen, you just are. You're going to conflict. Now, it can escalate. It can be different ways. But when you have conflict and you work through it, your marriage is grown. And I tell couples, one of the best gifts you can give yourself, I do this in pre-marriage, is learning how to resolve conflict. Because then no matter what comes up, you can solve it. It keeps you from going into unhealthy behaviors. and it moves your marriage forward. So I think that's kind of the key to it, really.
Yeah, that's really good, Dr. Kim. I love that. I think just asking yourself great questions can help you get to maybe the reason why you're doing it and really like get beneath the surface and go a little bit deeper to solve the problem on a deeper level. Like you said, maybe your family of origin has a big part, a
Yeah,
piece of why you're doing what you're doing. So ask yourself, why are you being silent? What do you hope to gain from it? Are you trying to manipulate your spouse's behavior in any way by the way that you are acting? And, just kind of asking yourself really good questions so you can figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And maybe even see how silly it is. If you ask yourself those
right.
questions, like maybe you will see that, oh, I am trying to gain this from them by punishing them in this way. And then you can say, like, well, that's not like when you kind of call it for what it is, it's easier to deal with and to change the behavior when you're actually calling it what it is.
No, I think that's really good. And I think going back just a minute from family of origin, I think I see that probably causing a problem more in the early part of a marriage, because that was your textbook on marriage, whether your parents were together or whatever it was, you learned from that. And so I think we just naturally begin to apply some of the things, even some of the things that we hated. And it is just that awareness. Why am I acting like this? And then what's a healthier way to do that? But I think that's something we all kind of have to work through of what is a healthy way to handle conflict. And most of us, I don't know that I ever talked to anybody that saw it consistently modeled well in a healthy marriage, in a healthy way in their parents' marriage.
Yeah, definitely. So we have to learn for ourselves. Yeah, that's
Right.
good. So what is the difference between the cold shoulder and the silent treatment and setting a boundary that you aren't going to engage in something that's unreasonable?
Huge. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just so huge. I mean, one, like we said, is manipulative, and other's healthy, really. And I think learning how to set healthy boundaries is so important for us, and not to make boundaries, in Cloud Townsend's book, they talk about those can't be manipulative. They can't be, this is a protection thing. This is saying you can't cross this line, and it's done in a healthy way. It's good for you. It's really good for the other person because you're not allowing that behavior to continue. That's very different. And it's a healthy way to do that, where you can sit down and say, this is my boundary here.
Hmm.
And this is something and this is why it's my boundary. And this is what I need you to do. It's much healthier than sometimes the cold shoulder. The person may not know exactly why you're giving the cold shoulder.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, and I think there is like an example of a reasonable time to stop engaging and to stop talking to your spouse would be if they're name calling or they're being really
Yes,
unkind. And so you don't have to engage with your spouse if they're calling you names, if they're cussing at you, if they're yelling at you. In fact, it is completely reasonable and healthy to set a boundary that you're going to remove yourself from that situation if they're going to behave in that way.
right.
Another way that I see this kind of playing out sometimes is being silent for a timeout is different than giving someone the cold shoulder. So if you need
Absolutely.
time to calm down because things are heated and things are escalating and you need time to calm down and to pray and to think more reasonably, like saying, hey, I need a minute. But the difference in that is communicating it, not just walking it out of the room and slamming the door, but rather communicating, hey, I need a time. I want to solve this problem with you. We are going to work through this. I love you, but I'm going to need a couple minutes, or I'm going to need the evening. Like, let's
Right.
talk about this
Right.
in the morning. Like, I need a timeout from this conflict. I need a timeout from this argument. That is okay. That is reasonable. That's fine to do in a marriage.
Yep. And I think you could even say, if you've tried to talk to your spouse about the cold shoulder stuff and changing, you can be healthier to set a boundary though. When you do this, I'm not going to be around it. I'm willing to talk to you about the problem. I'm going to deal with the problem. I'm willing to go to counseling with you. But when you do the cold shoulder, I'm going to remove myself from the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a healthier way to do it. And then
Yeah.
it puts back on the other person.
Yeah. So what does that look like? How would you remove? So say your spouse is giving you the cold shoulder and you've communicated that you don't want them to do that. How do you then remove yourself from that
I
situation?
think you tell them where you're going. I think you leave for a while.
Mm,
Maybe go to Barnes and Noble and sit down and look at books for a while, but give them
yeah.
a time to think about it too. And you go think about it and pray about it,
Hmm.
that, and see if that works. I mean, it kind of depends on what's going on in the dynamics of the cold shoulder stuff. And maybe you can't always leave, but you can, I think if someone's giving me a cold shoulder, I'm not sure how to react back. I think my tendency would be to make me kind of angry. And so I would probably might be shorter or something like that. And so the other way to do it would be, okay, you set that boundary and that you're not going to respond like they're giving you the cold shoulder. I'm
Mm,
going to talk to you. I'm going to engage in you. You may not say anything back, but I'm not upset at you. And until you tell me why you're upset at me, I can't do anything about it.
yeah. Definitely. Definitely. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Well, this has been an interesting conversation. I definitely think it's something that happens in a lot of marriages today. And so hopefully we were able to provide some good, healthy tips for how to deal with this. What final thoughts do you have on this topic for our listener, Dr. Kim?
Well, kind of like anything that we talk about, most things we talk about are to make your marriage better. And so look at yourself, look at your spouse, or either one of you using the cold shoulder. And if you are, what is your next step in doing that? Is it something you're doing? And so you've got to begin to deal with the things as your spouse is dealing. So you've got to talk about it. Do you need counseling? Just stop that in your marriage.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, next week on the podcast, I'm really excited because we have Jenny Lesko coming on the podcast to join Dr. Kim to talk about how to flourish in the midst of a struggle. Jenny is a wife to Levi Lesko, who pastors Fresh Life Church in Montana. They lost their daughter to an asthma attack in 2012, and Jenny's new book speaks to engaging in the struggle and how to fight to flourish even in the darkest of times. Jenny is an awesome leader and speaker and speaks so much gospel truth in her book. That you can use for any trial that you are facing and any trial that you're in. So we're really excited to have her on the podcast. So be sure to come back for that episode next week. Hey, as always, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us on Instagram or email us at info@awesomemarriage.com. We love praying for you and we love hearing from you. If you do love the show, please take a moment and leave a rating and review of the podcast wherever you listen. It is the best way to show your support of the show, and it helps the podcast get seen by more people. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.